right, we
I'm
are
hearing
live.
music in the background. Well,
I don't
hello
think that's on my
everybody.
end.
This is live. Well, this is our second. Why is there an echo?
Do you have extra tab pulled open showing the stream on YouTube? Bear with us, folks. We're getting some technical difficulties figured out here. This is our first time doing a simulcast like this. We are live, by the way, on my channel, Fandomology, and of course here on Release McCracken.
Has the echoing stopped?
Has it?
I'm hoping. Well, let's go ahead and start it anyway. Hello everybody. This is our second part of Kiss, and we're talking to the years 1981 through 1996, from the Elder to Unplugged.
Mm-hmm.
And I have good old Paul here, and we're going to start talking some mid 80s, especially Kiss. So let's
Yes.
start with the very first album, The
And
Elder.
boy are we starting with a stinker.
Well, it is what it is. The Elder was a concept album. Was supposed to be a movie. Didn't work out. Uh, some people love it, some people hate it, and some people are confused by it. Uh, this is the first Kiss album not to be certified gold. It did not go gold.
Like
There
even
was
today, it
absolutely,
hasn't gone gold.
huh?
Like even today, it hasn't gone gold.
Has not gone gold. Uh, they never did a tour for this. At least Unmasked, they didn't do an American tour, but there was a world tour for Unmasked. This is the first studio album. There was no tour. This is how bad the album sold. Uh, you can almost say, in a way, it was a revolt because diehard Kiss fans wasn't really, they were shocked with Dynasty. Unmasked wasn't really that bad, but there, like again, there was no tour for it, so promoting it and it didn't get the promotion here in the states. So it was going gold was a plus for them for that here in the states. But this is the album that if there was an abyss that Kiss went into, this is the abyss. Unfortunately, this is Eric Carr's official first album.
Yeah,
Uh, as far as musically, I think the only shining moment is Eric Carr. Uh, as far as the guitar work on this, from what I understand, a lot of Ace Frehley's solos and everything was cut or wasn't even used.
and that I
Uh,
didn't know.
I don't think it would have mattered either way. Let's just say this album is an album. Unless you're a diehard Kiss fan and you got to have everything Kiss, this is an album that's good to skip.
Agreed. And real quick, I want to say hello to someone who actually left a comment last night when we were supposed to do this. Matt Rissman asking, "Is this going to be a John Denver live stream?" No, but that's coming.
No, I won't be here. I won't be here.
That's okay. I will we'll talk about that later. But anyways, there have been albums that I listened to by various different bands that I just straight up have not liked. Like for example, Born Again by Black Sabbath or Headless Cross again by Black Sabbath. And I didn't like them, but I could still see, you know, at least in the case of Headless Cross, there was still elements of it to enjoy, even if I didn't enjoy the overall product. There's been very, very few albums that have just outright made me mad to listen to. Like the very act of listening to it made me angry.
Oh,
And sadly, this album was one of those because, again, to me, this more so than Dynasty and Unmasked seemed like an outright abandonment of Kiss's signature style, 70s party hard rock, for lack of a better term. And to try and do something like this, it
well,
just,
like I said,
how could it succeed?
when you compare it to like Born Again and uh Crimson Idol or whatever, which one you were comparing
Headless
it to,
Cross.
Headless Cross. I mean, for me, they're Black Sabbath albums,
Oh, yeah.
unidentifiable uh, Black Sabbath albums. Far as
Mhm.
this is so non-Kiss that it's like Kiss doing country music. It's just no.
Wait till we
And
get
they already had
unplugged.
a hard time. And I remember at the time they promised people this was supposed to be get back to rock. Well, this was far from getting back to rock. And the two people that said not to do this, Ace Frehley, who was outvoted,
Hmm.
and Eric Carr, who did not have a vote. So
Yeah, because by
again,
this point, Peter Criss was long gone.
well,
He quit.
he officially he was gone in '80. So yeah, he still had 25% of the band, but he had no say, no voting rights. But he still owned 25% of the band. And you would have to admit, even though Unmasked did go gold, and then here's this, looking like Peter Criss might have been on the smart one, saying it's time to walk away. But
Agreed.
this album, more than anything, signified Ace really saying, you know, this isn't for me. And after hearing it, I could understand now, not back then, now understanding why Ace was, I need to get out of this band. They just,
Right.
you know,
Now, whose idea, before we move on, whose idea was this album? Was this solely a Paul Stanley idea? Was
no.
this
This was
solely
a
a Gene
Gene,
Sim?
this, the idea come up with Gene Simmons and Bob Ezrin, but Paul Stanley gave the vote of the okay. You had to remember, originally there was four people in the band. They had four votes. Tie-breaking vote went to Bill Coyne. Okay,
Mhm.
so he was the tiebreaker. After Peter Criss left, Eric Carr does not have a vote. Ace really
Mm.
has a vote. Paul Stanley has a vote. Gene Simmons has a vote. And you really don't need Bill Coyne anymore because he doesn't need to be a tie-breaking vote because there's only three people. And if you notice, in Dynasty and Unmasked, there's a lot of Ace material. Ace gets about three songs in each of the albums. On
And they're the
this
best
album,
songs on the
yeah.
albums.
And on this album, he only gets one. So it not only shows you that how they're looking at Ace really, but yeah. And let's be honest, at that time in 1981, there was a lot of things going on. Excalibur was out. That was a popular movie. Dungeons and Dragons was out. That was very
Mhm.
popular. A lot of people were into that. So, and they had just done the previous, I think it was right there at the late 70s, early 80s, the animation of The Lord of the Rings, which was very popular on
With
TV.
Ralph Batchke, if I said that
Yeah.
right.
And so Kiss was trying to do, well, let's cash in on the Excalibur type deal and make something like it. And no, it failed.
Right.
It failed. And you have to remember a lot of the bands from the 70s that's going into the 80s, Aerosmith goes off the charts and somewhere in the gutter. Aerosmith's nowhere to be. Yes, they're releasing albums, but it's not Aerosmith. It's pretty much, not their usual stuff.
Right.
So a lot of bands are starting to crumble. New bands
Meanwhile,
are. are appearing. Not that they're really new, but Judas Priest, AC/DC gets a new singer,
Hmm.
and they get the Black Album, which is one of the most popular albums ever.
Yeah.
Um,
Then there's Sabbath getting Dio.
yeah, and but then again, you're getting bands like Deep Purple have been gone for 4 years. You're getting Led Zeppelin that's done after 1980 because John Bonham dies.
Yeah.
So, you know,
Van Halen though they're still going strong, albeit
but they weren't at this time. They weren't the powerhouse they would become in the mid '80s and '90s.
when they become Van Hagar.
Yeah, right. And right about now, the most popular band in popularity would probably be Journey. Journey would probably be one of the most popular bands besides AC/DC. You know, so
Okay.
it's a change of the guard. Some bands, the older bands, will come back in some form and fashion,
Yeah.
and but unfortunately for Kiss, like I said, this is the album. If this was Creatures of the Night, I don't think Kiss would ever have a sinkhole. But because it was the Elder, this is their sinkhole. So,
But before we move on, as always, I want to give a ranking out of 10, and I give this one a 2 out of 10. This is, in my opinion, Kiss's worst album. I can't even pick a best track. So yeah, just as Phil said, unless you have to listen to absolutely everything, which I did for the sake of this review, if you have to listen to absolutely everything, skip this one.
well, for me, I would give it a 4 out of 10. I have heard worse. And for me, the track to hear, if there is any track, is A World Without Heroes.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
the only one that's they even remotely still acknowledge anymore.
mhm. So, like I said, this album will become in 2 years, taken pretty much whatever was put out. The album pretty much disappears. So the only time between 81 up until 90, the only way
Hmm.
to get it was by buying a used or someone giving you the album because there was no albums. They didn't reprint. So that was how bad that album was. So the
Right.
next album we got is Kiss Killers.
Which,
And
real quick, I want to be while we have this picture up, I want to point out for those that are unaware, the guy that is second from the left. So you got Gene Simmons on the far left, and then the guy next to him, that is Eric Carr. That is the guy that replaced Peter Criss, and his makeup design is the fox. And you mentioned to me at one point, Phil, that when they were first designing the makeup for Eric Carr, he wasn't even supposed to be a fox. He was supposed to be, what was it, a hawk?
a Hawk. And there was actually makeup design and costume design for it. And as soon
I'm
as
gonna
they
try and
saw
find
him
it.
put it on, no, don't show it. Let's not embarrass the man. uh, it's Big Bird. It's pretty much he looked like we would look like Big Bird, and I'm glad they axed that right away. I'm glad Eric Carr came up with the fox.
Eric Carr, forgive me.
You know, don't no 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 no. But anyway, Kiss Killers came about because the European side of Mercury Records. At this time, Kiss has left Casablanca and went with Mercury. But the funny deal is, Mercury ends up buying Casablanca. So either way, they were going to go to Mercury anyway. But their European branch wanted a compilation, but they wanted 4 songs. Hard rock was the demand. So you got 4 songs on this album, totally brand new.
Hmm.
Uh, I'm a Legend Tonight, Partners in Crime, Nowhere to Run, and I forget the fourth one.
Yeah, I don't remember either, but the songs all were amazing.
They were
Eve,
they were the songs they originally were going to put out when it was quote unquote the Elder was supposed to be the hard rock album. That's what they were going to use,
right.
and this is what they brought out for this compilation. And Ace Frehley at this time, even though you see that image, that's not Ace Frehley playing on that four songs. That is Bob Kulick playing the guitar. So,
And
and that
remind me,
that photo shoot,
Kulick is Bob Kulick in any way related to Bruce Kulick,
that's his
who comes up
brother.
later? That's his brother.
Uh,
Okay.
that album cover is really a photo shoot from The Elder. So that wasn't like
Yeah.
they got a special photo shoot for that album.
The Elder is so bad it made Paul Stanley wear, I know the real reason why, but it made Paul Stanley wear a ridiculous headband and it ruined Gene Simmons's iconic hair.
Now, something of a little info. Put the album. If you can put the album back up there, real quick.
Hmm.
The European, since this came out in Europe, a lot of places in Europe didn't allow them S's that way. So Kiss, on their lighting of their show, would have to take the S's and on the albums, and they would use backwards Z's instead of the S's.
And I want to say
So,
hello. I believe he's in my chat. Hello to Trent. What's up?
so my feeling is this: if them four songs that was released just for Killers had been the start of a album, I think if that would have been what the Elder came out as, they would have had something.
Yeah, and I
But
think if that is indeed what would have happened, his personal problems aside, if that is the sound that the Elder would have been, Ace Frehley would have probably stuck around longer.
pretty much, pretty much. But I would say at this time, because officially them songs were recorded in 81, this album was released in early 82. Ace really at this time, even though he is technically still in the band, he's not. He's on his way out. Uh, which brings up the big, how can we put it? The big, let's just call it the big octopus of the room, Creatures of the Night. And if you
Yes.
notice, we have two versions of it.
Hmm.
The first one with the blue and the makeup is the original album release. And
Yes.
as you see it there, this shows Ace Frehley. Ace Frehley didn't play anything on that
It
album.
was all Vinnie Vincent, if I'm not
No,
mistaken,
no, there was
right?
other people besides Vinny, but Vinny played the
Oh,
majority of it.
okay.
And in '84, they Kiss, or this is a little jump ahead to explain the second album cover. In 1984, Kiss's popularity came back. They did a video of a live show in Detroit that was popular on MTV, and a lot of the songs were from Creatures of the Night. And since that video was very popular, I think it went platinum. Kiss decided, and this is 2 years after the album, uh, let's put out the album again. But what they did was, since they were out of makeup, let's put Kiss the current lineup. So that is the album that you see there with the non makeup on. Bruce Kulick is on the album, but he again didn't play anything on there. Uh, Another thing is when they released that album, they swapped two songs, Saint and Sinners, and I believe Killers. One was on side what technically would have been side one was on side two, but for that they just swapped the songs.
Right.
And
Real
then
quick, I
go
want to
ahead.
address, didn't mean to cut you off. I want to address Trent. No, this time we are not on a Discord call. The Discord calls are only for my gaming streams. This is us on StreamYard. So it's just the two of us in here. This is pretty much how our non gaming stuff goes.
So Creatures of the Night. Uh There's no Ace Frehley, barely any Gene Simmons. So you get a hodgepodge of people playing instruments. The only person you can say that plays on the entire album is Eric Carr.
And
So
he
you can
plays
kind of say
amazingly.
this is Eric Carr's solo album. If there's a solo album for him, this is it. And let's just say Eric Carr did wonders on this album.
He did.
There is no recording of a studio album with someone playing drums like he does on Creatures of the Night. This whole entire album, his drums are, I don't know how they did it. I don't think it could be reduplicated even today. Them drumming sounds on that is unbelievable. So, uh, yeah. And Creatures of the Night for me is probably the best album outside the original four that Kiss
I
has done. Uh,
so
you
I
can
definitely. Oh, sorry.
go ahead.
Okay, so basically, my thoughts on this album. This is a good return to form for Kiss, but there is another elephant in the room that we do need to address, and that is those that prefer the 70s Kiss sound and those that prefer the 80s Kiss sound. And you and I have, of course, talked about this, Phil. You said, and correct me if I'm wrong, you said that you prefer the 80s Kiss sound. Is that correct?
I grew up in the 70s and the 80s. I always will love the original band, but I will say my favorite version of the band and the music is the 80s Kiss. And
And
I
for
like I said,
me,
I love all the old albums, but for me, there's not an out. Uh, I have my favorites, but my overall favorite album Kiss ever done is Creatures of the Night.
so for me, I am, as someone that's pretty much consumed almost all of Kiss's discography in about a month, month and a half. Hold on one second. Hold up. Sorry, John peeked his head in. As someone that has consumed pretty much all of Kiss's discography in about a month and a half, I lean heavily toward the 70s albums. And in my mind, that is what Kiss's sound is. Now, I want to make this clear. I do like a lot of what Kiss does in the 80s. In fact, there's a couple albums that are going to be coming up that I give perfect scores to. But I give them those scores judging them in their own right because compared to the 70s, I prefer the 70s. So Creatures of the Night, kind of going into that. Creatures of the Night, I give probably, I am going to go ahead and give it a 10 out of 10. It is, in its own right, a great album. However, it's just a bit too flashy compared to what I prefer from Kiss in the 70s, from pretty much the first album to Unmasked. Unmasked, not so much, but pretty much every album from the first one to Dynasty. I know Dynasty was the quote unquote disco album, but it still, at least to my ears, was straight ahead rock and roll. So the title track for Creatures of the Night is probably my one pick for best song on the whole thing.
Underrated song for me. I would say Creatures of the Night is a 10 out of 10. Uh, I will say my favorite track is I Love It Loud. If there's a Kiss song that identifies Kiss besides Rock and Roll All Night, is I Love It Loud. Uh, Even though there are some things later on people find out, like I said, people didn't know back in the day that Ace really didn't play on there. A lot of songs somebody else was playing bass, or even Eric Carr was playing bass. So, regardless of all that, the album itself and the material in itself is a great album. Though I do want to talk about two demos for this album. Uh,
Hmm.
One is "It's My Life," and the other one being that ends up on "Lick It Up," "Not Pretty Innocent," which comes out on "Lick It Up" with just Gene singing. On the "Creatures of the Night" demo, it's Gene and Paul singing. And for
Hmm.
me, I think if them two tracks had made the album, I think this album probably would have got pushed a lot higher in what came out at the time. Uh, the video was fine. Airplay wasn't much because people were turning away from Kiss, but this album is I think an essential Kiss album. So, but
Right.
being that as it may, oh, one other thing we're going to discuss, and it's got to come up in between here and Lick It Up. Uh, and you probably notice on the thumbnail of the stream the image of Kiss with Eric Carr and Benny
Let me
Vincent in makeup.
let me bring that image into
You
StreamYard
can go ahead and
itself.
put it up.
Hold up. I gotta delete some stuff. So, in order to do this, give me a second. I gotta delete something else here. I didn't know StreamYard had a limit on that stuff. All right. There it is.
Okay. Now, after Ace really technically his deal was done after the video,
Hmm.
so they had to do Benny Vincent. Uh, wasn't much of a competition there. They just needed a guitar player that was able to go on tour and play the material. At first, he was quote unquote a temporary replacement for Ace, which we all knew was going to be a permanent. But
Yeah.
if you see, there's his makeup, the Ankh, or what they call the Wizard, and Paul Stanley
Hmm.
designed it for him. He has Paul Stanley decided to use gold instead of silver, and I think that is a pretty good makeup job. Uh,
Yes, and
I
it's a shame. It's a shame that it doesn't last.
Yeah, I would say this as a Kiss fan. If you wanted to say, is there something that you would want to be? It's kind of like finding the rare car, like finding a Mustang, but then you end up finding what do they call it, a Shelby instead. Let's
Hmm.
take argument. Uh, not great with cars, but I'm just throwing it out there. In the '80s, growing up as a teenager, if you wanted to collect pictures or images, you wanted that image of Kiss because it was rare to see Vinnie Vincent in makeup. And later on, you're going to have people and other members of Kiss say the reason Kiss was in the down spiral was because Eric Carr and Benny Vincent had their own makeup and they weren't in Ace or Peter's makeup, which is bull. I lived at that time. The reason why their fans was leaving them in droves was because of Dynasty, Unmasked, and The Elder. It had nothing to do about Vinnie Vincent having his own makeup and Eric Carr having his own makeup. And I don't
Yeah.
know anybody in this world that would say, we don't like Eric Carr, we don't like his makeup. I have never met that person.
A
But
lot of people a
good.
lot of people cite Eric Carr as like the best, most talented member of Kiss.
I will tell you
And
this, and this is almost yeah. Yeah. I'll go out on a limb. I would say if there was a poll, if you had just the original band and Eric Carr, I think Eric Carr will beat out almost all of them in
I agree.
popularity.
Like,
And if
he's
you come
certainly my
across
number 2
pure
favorite member.
musicians that like Kiss music, they would say if you want to rank top two musicians in Kiss, Ace Frehley and Eric Carr.
Yeah, Ace
Uh,
Frehley is my number
but
1
as
favorite
far
of
as
Kiss.
the makeup, no, because Kiss did not lose popularity because Vinnie Vincent was in makeup and Eric Carr was in makeup. Had nothing to do about them two. Because if that was the case, then you might as well say you didn't like Creatures of the Night album because that was the majority of the two that were playing on it.
Hmm.
So I don't buy that. And I know a current member of Kiss, Eric Singer, has said, oh, it's because them two were in makeup. Was not the case. Eric Singer can say whatever he wants to today, but if let me tell you this, if the Creatures of the Night came out in 1981, I think it would have been a hit for Kiss, as bigger hit than what it was at the time. And it wasn't that big of a hit. Kiss did not get a gold standard on Creatures of the Night until 1990, even with the reissue. And there's a reason for it. When they were printing out the album, there was another person on the record company, uh, John Cougar, aka John Cougar Mellencamp or John Mellencamp, whatever you want to call it. There was a mistake print on some of the Kiss records where the first side was Kiss and the second side was John Mellencamp. So a
Hmm.
good ton of the Creatures of the Night albums had to be returned and you had to wait for a replacement.
Wow.
And if somebody was that dumb, and there was a lot of people that did it and replaced it, guess what? You gave up an album mistake that is rare and hard to find that you probably would have to pay. I don't know. Look on eBay, probably a good $400 or $500 just because
Yeah,
of that
that's
mistake. And
yeah,
another
that's a
and another
lot.
big thing about how they determine how much records sold. A record used to come out back in the day and they would judge by the initial shipment. So if I shipped the local wall to wall 1,000 records, then that 1,000 records got counted. But then it got subtracted if over the month's time. See, over a month's time, they kind of took records back and they got shipped back because they didn't sell. So you might keep 2 or 3 copies out on the floor, but the other 8 or 9 copies of the record go shipped back. So that gets subtracted. You have to remember there was no scan. So it's hard to say how much a record really sold for back in the day. You don't get to scanning until like 94, 95. So in some cases, an album might even did better or even 10 times more than what normally has been told to people. So you named the album ACDC Back in Black. I don't know what they sold, 12 or 13 million copies. In 1980, there was no scan, so I wouldn't be surprised if it was a lot higher than what they officially say.
Hmm.
So, is it possible Creatures of the Night actually was gold? Yes. Would it be officially? No. Because, like I said, the way they tracked is by how much was shipped minus how much was shipped back. And that's how you determine if an album went gold, platinum, or double platinum, or whatever.
Right.
So,
So, with that, I believe now we move on to Lick It Up.
yep. Now you have the big thing where Kiss goes on MTV. They take the makeup off. They announce this album. Uh, Supposedly, there's an image out there. I have never been able to see it of Kiss with Lick It Up with the makeup on in case they wanted to keep it. But this is officially, even though Creatures of the Night still says Casablanca, this is officially the first album Kiss has under Mercury, the Mercury label.
Right.
So Lick It Up ends up being a big hit. It goes platinum and puts Kiss back to close, not actually 100% where they were there in the 70s, but it puts them platinum. This is their first
Yes.
platinum album since not Dynasty. Yeah, Dynasty went double platinum. So this is their first platinum album of the 80s.
And
So,
it is an amazing album. And again, I got to go with the title track, at least for me, as the best album. This is another one that is a 10 out of 10. And Vinnie Vincent, I say what you want. I do like Bruce Kulick's playing, and we'll talk about him when we get to, I believe, Asylum. But I think Vinnie Vincent should have stuck it out with him at least through Animalize, if not stuck it with him through the entirety of the 80s. Because, yes, I said earlier that I do prefer the 70s Kiss sound. And clearly, what they wanted Vinnie Vincent to do was basically be Kiss's personal Eddie Van Halen. Listen to how he plays. He plays almost exactly like Eddie Van Halen. But and while yeah, that doesn't fit what Kiss was back in the 70s, he's still a great player. And in fact, I think he's the best. Looking at it purely from a technical skill level, I think he is the best guitarist Kiss ever hired, period. His one weakness, though, and I think both he and Mark St. John, who we'll talk about with the next album, we you mentioned this, Phil, that both he and Mark St. John didn't quite know when to stop as far as how extravagant to make their solos. Is that right?
well, again, this is early 80s, so guitarists tend to go the longer the solo, the better. Uh, Sometimes this is the cause of why 80s bands break up. Vinnie Vincent solos at live concerts and here on studio, you can tell. Kiss had to tell them, okay, the solo has to stop. Okay. There's a time and place for your solo, but a 2-3 minute solo isn't going to cut it. It's not Kiss. All
Yeah.
right. Uh, Kiss's model, and when you think about a guitar solo, Kiss's model is going back to the 40s and 50s of a solo of a saxophone. The saxophone was
Hmm.
the solo, not the guitar. Most of the people back then didn't play the guitar. When you hear rock and roll or any type of music, you hear the saxophone, and the saxophone is what did the solo. Uh, so to Kiss, a Eddie Van Halen wouldn't fit, even though, according to people, Eddie Van Halen asked to be in Kiss in '82.
And Gene said no, stick it
No,
out with your own band.
yeah. Uh, and a lot of people in '82, when they were auditioning for Kiss, a lot of big names, Slash from Guns N' Roses, Doug
Who
Aldridge.
would who both would have been a great fit because they aren't really
The problem with
shredders
both,
like.
and you have to understand Kiss, they at that time they're not Zach Wild and the guy Dio had on his Lock Up the Wolves album. They're not going to take an 18-year-old out on tour. That just no, it wouldn't have happened back then. Uh, Maybe now, yeah, you might do it, but back then, you know, uh, I would have think if out of the two, Doug Aldridge probably would have been a better fit for Kiss than Slash, even though he does play similar style to Ace Frehley. You
Yeah.
know,
Which,
but
by the way, if you want to hear some good stuff from Doug Aldrich, look up Dio's 2005 concert that he does in London.
yeah, Lick It Up is a great album for a lot of reasons. Kiss fans love it. It's one of the few albums in the '80s that reminisce of the '70s where they didn't have outside writers. And if you notice, Vinnie Vincent's all credited on a lot of the material.
Hmm.
Uh, I know you like the first track, but that's not Vinnie Vincent playing that track.
Who is that?
That's another person playing the track. That's the only track Vinnie Vincent does not play guitar on.
It's not
So
Bob Kulick, is it?
no, No, Exciter is not, and I didn't know this till like about 10 years ago. So, yep, they even on there. Like I said, it isn't as when it comes to musical chairs on the album. Uh, Creatures of the Night got probably the most. Uh, Look It Up, you still get it with just the one, but the rest of the album is Benny. Uh, I don't think Benny could have uh, done worse, or probably could have done better, but for whatever reason, they went with another guitar player on that track.
Hmm.
So, but I do like Lick It Up. I do not think it's better than Creatures of the Night, though. I think the reason why it's more popular was because the makeup came off. You know, if you play the album side by side against each other, you're only looking at the candy of who's on the cover. Kiss without makeup. That was a big deal in '83. Oh, this is Kiss without makeup. You know,
Hmm.
so this puts Kiss back on track. And like I said, it's their first platinum of the decade. So things are looking up until the end of the tour, and we get ready to do the start of Animalize.
Which is right here.
Okay. Animalize. Kiss had enough of Vinnie Vincent. Uh, Whatever you want to describe it as, Vinny not being able to handle his role in Kiss, or Kiss feeling he just wasn't meant for Kiss. Uh, it's a shame. I think if Vinny would have stayed in Kiss maybe 2 or 3 more years, he would have been a lot bigger than what he was. His writing is good, but the man had some questionable morals. Uh, I personally don't know all the story, but telling a person, "This is my favorite guitar. Here you go. Give me the 2,000 for it," and come to find out he never even played the guitar. That's questionable morals. Uh,
Which, given certain things that have come out about Paul and Gene, that's
you
saying
never know
something.
the full. Like I said, you never know. We'll never know the full story. Yes, there's the guy's name that played on Exciter. Thank you. Yep, there you go. That's the
And I
name of
don't
the
believe.
man that played on Exciter, and he did a good job.
Yeah.
You
And
know.
just real quick, as a side note, I don't believe I've seen you, Mr. BSRG 550, on either of our channels. So if this is indeed your first time, go ahead and hit subscribe. This is a double cast, by the way. So we are live both on Release McCracken and on my channel, Fandomology. I'm gonna wager a guess that you're on Release McCracken, but go ahead and subscribe to both of us because Phil does some great content on here. And then, of course, there's me who does, different streams on Sunday and different gaming streams. Lately, I've been raging at Mario Kart. But yeah, go ahead and hit subscribe if this is your first time here and check out what else we have to offer.
Well, Animalize turns out to be a great album.
Mhm.
They get a new guitar player, Mark St. John. You would probably classify him as a shredder. Uh,
Yes,
when he
but not
joined,
as good, in my opinion, as Vinnie Vincent.
no. Uh, when he joined, I was like, "Oh boy, here we go, another guitar player." I wasn't a fan one way or the other of him, but I do like the album. Uh, the album, like I said, there's a video that came out for part of the tour when they were in Detroit, which is a great tour. That was very popular. The song "Heaven's on Fire" was very popular. Uh, this album, there, if you notice, Lick It Up and Animalize, there's really no ballads.
Yes.
And for a Kiss album, uh, it's kind of unusual because you're going through the from Destroyer all the way to Creatures of the Night. You getting ballads, at least one. Here you got two straight albums, Lick It Up and Animalize. There's no balance.
Right.
So, and officially, this is the first album, and it depends on where and who you look up the album sales. Some people say Animalize is double platinum. Some people say it's single platinum. I was always told it was double platinum, so that's what I'm sticking with. So, yes, this would be the first album of the decade that went double platinum, and Heaven's on Fire being the main single. Uh, I would say again, Eric Carr steals the show
He
on this.
absolutely does. And
Uh,
of course, hello to our friend Crit, who says, I am looking at the 180-minute mark for this long epic stream.
we hate you,
It's
Eric. Anyway,
here,
uh,
just because I'm gonna play a clip. I'm gonna
no.
play a clip just because. Where is it? There it is.
Hey, I can be. I can sound like Cash Money. Did you know that?
Do it.
Let's hear it.
Where? Oh my god. No. They put woke stuff. They put woke stuff in my Star Wars.
Okay. Well, going back to the Animalize, I would think that this tour and this album again builds upon Lick It Up. So Kisses, I would say, for me back in the day, remembering Kiss was back and they seemed to be on solid ground. I remember midway through it, finding out Mark St. John, for some reason, according to them, he had a syndrome with his hand, which has caused him to swell. And they
Oh.
had to bring a substitute guitarist, Bruce Kulick, and he did the European tour, come over, did part of the American tour, and come to find out people really liked Bruce Kulick, and he end up getting the job,
Yes.
which was a good
Which
thing. And unbeknownst to a lot of people, he did try out in '82 for Kiss. I always said, what if he took the job, got the job in '82 after Ace Frehley? Think it would have solved a lot of pain and heartache that Kiss fans went from '82 to '84. But thank God we got Bruce. And he
yes.
does play as a ghost guitarist on one track on Animalize. I forget the track, but he does play as a ghost guitarist on one track.
And
So
speaking of Bruce Kulick, I actually just found something, not to get too terribly off topic here, but I found something interesting related to him because it was always coursing through, it's been coursing through my mind kind of through this conversation. You said it that Lick It Up was where they first took off the makeup. But what if they hadn't taken off the makeup? And what if they designed their own makeup for Bruce Kulick? I found a fan rendering of what his
he had a
makeup might have looked
contest.
like.
He had a contest during COVID for fans to make him a makeup.
And this is what I found. Allegedly, his persona would have been the dog, which I think would have been
That's
terrible.
what he said if he was able to be given the choice of making his makeup. If he was able to make up the makeup. Now, would Kiss have allowed him to make his own makeup, or would they make up his makeup?
I think it would have been a combination of the two, where they would have, where Paul Stanley probably been like, okay, you want to be a dog, fine, but I'm gonna make the design.
I think when it comes to putting on the makeup and to talk about putting back on the makeup, which we'll talk about when they get to Hot and Shade, there was other talk. There was other talk. But there is a video out there where Bruce Kulick had a contest during COVID where he asked fans to design his makeup, and someone designed the makeup, and the person won, and he put it on. So, but then again, that's fan made. Uh,
Right.
I don't have a problem with the dog image. The people always had talked back, especially around '89, and I'll go back to the reason why when we get up there. But I will say this: the version that starts with Kiss with Gene, Paul, Eric, and Bruce. That not I love the original lineup, and I do like the lineup of Vinny and Eric. But out of all of them, the lineup with Eric Carr and Bruce is my favorite. I know a lot of people are going to be a little hard on Eric Carr because, quote unquote, Eric Carr was playing the songs faster. And the reasons he was playing the drums faster, he was told to because Kiss at one time was doing 15 songs on a live performance. By middle of the 80s and going into the early 90s, Kiss is going up to 20 to 25 songs. And you
Which
have a
is
limit,
ridiculous.
which you have a limit. You have to remember if they go on stage at 8, and depending on what city and town and what state they're in, you have to be off by a certain time. So if you're playing a song and you're playing, let's say, Firehouse, and Firehouse normally takes 5 minutes on the studio track to play.
Hmm.
So they don't have 5 minutes to give to that song when you got 25 songs to play. So they may have to do that song in 4 minutes, which requires the speed up of the song to get it done.
Right.
So we knew this back in the day. We knew why they were speeding it up because they have more material. And again, you going from early Kiss to about 85, they're doing 15 songs. You're going from 87 to modern times with Kiss, and they're doing 20, 25 songs. So something has to give. So what
Hmm.
gives? Speed of the song. The faster you can
Yes.
play it, and long as they're respecting it, like I said, if they're shaving off a minute by playing a song faster, I don't have a problem with it, long as they're doing the song justice. So I never had a problem seeing Eric Carr and Bruce Kulick live playing any of the Kiss songs, either ones that they did that was their own material or ones that came from the original band. I loved every tour that I saw with them guys
Yes.
playing. So
So my thoughts real quick on Animalize. This one I give a 9.5 out of 10. Heavens on Fire, I do gotta agree, is probably my favorite track out of the whole lot. There's nothing outright bad about this album at all to me. It's just that overall, the musicianship and the production, it sounded like just an ever so slight downgrade from Lick It Up. But that gets ramped back up again for the next album, which Bruce Kulick officially joins the band for, Asylum.
you forgot me. Let me get my rating in there, pal.
Sorry. Sorry.
Animalize, I will give it a 9 out of 10. I will say the best song for me that I love on there is Thrills in the Night. I love that song. Uh, I do like Heavens on Fire, don't get me wrong, but I do like that song. Uh, the only thing I could say that's discouraging about the album cover could have been better. I would have preferred the reverse had been the cover and the cover had been reversed. Other than that, yeah,
Yeah,
no
the
problem.
animal skins did seem a bit strange.
Yeah, it also seemed kind of cheap. But
Yeah.
yeah, let's go to the next one, Asylum, and I'll give
Yes.
everybody a little clue there. If you notice on Asylum, it's awful colorful, right? It's a
Yes.
colorful album. Now I want you to notice what color is Paul Stanley's lips?
Pinkish purple?
Okay. What color is his solo album background with his hair?
Pinkish purple?
There you go. Gene Simmons' lips, what color?
Red.
Okay. What color is the background of his album cover on his solo album?
Also red.
There you go. Bruce Kulick is what color lips?
Blue.
And Ace Frehley's color in the background of his solo album?
Was blue.
There you go. And Eric Carr, you see there, he has green. Peter Chris' solo album had the green light. That wasn't their choice. That was something Paul Stanley did. I don't mind the album cover. The only thing I can understand from what I heard from people is Eric Carr wasn't too happy that he kind of got chopped there. If you put the album back up there, you see he unfortunately gets chopped.
That is pretty.
Could they
bad.
had straightened the heads out a little bit better, and didn't have to put it on an angle that way, But I do like the reverse of the album cover. The reverse of the album was pretty cool. Animal Eyes. I love the whole entire album. I love every single video they came out with. The outfits for the tour was a throwback to like how Kiss used to do some stylish in the 70s, but a little bizarre there. But overall, Asylum was a great album. And as Kiss fans, they used to have this thing called Dial MTV. And it started around 84-ish. And you would come home from school, and MTV knew this, because young people were most of the people watching MTV at the time. And around 4 o'clock, they had Dial MTV. So you would dial in and match the phone number to a song of a particular artist. And they would take the top 10, and going by the ratio of the calls determines who had the best, who had number one. And Kiss at that time was the rulers of Dial MTV. Tears Are Falling was number one. And their competition was Motley Crue, and I think it came out with Home Sweet Home. So they were battling, and there'd be every day would be a different. Motley Crue won. Next day, Kiss won. Next day, Motley Crue won. Next day, Kiss won. And it was back and forth. To me, Dial MTV spoke a lot more about how an album and a band was than actual album sales. Because here you have the fans calling in. Here you have a legitimate band. There was a lot of people that would buy a Motley Crue, let's see, what is it? Theater of Pain. Okay, that was the album at the time. Now, were they buying it for Motley Crue, or were they buying the album just to hear that one song? And in the 80s, people would buy an album just to hear that one song. Wasn't for the rest of the songs, but for that one song. Was Motley Crue more popular than Kiss? Album sales, tour-wise, you got to give it to them. But on Dial MTV, Kiss tend to win the battles a lot more.
Right.
So,
and just as a side note, I think even though, yes, both bands have fallen to Father Time, Kiss arguably has aged better despite working harder.
Well, you have to remember, even if you took the time Motley Crue came out 83 or 82 to now, who put out more material? Kiss. Yeah. Now, they might have had more records that sold double, triple, quadruple platinum, but they ain't got more gold records than Kiss.
Right.
You see? Would any band say they would love to have the quadruple, triple platinum? Yes. But to say, hey, we have 50 gold albums, Motley Crue can't say that.
Exactly.
know.
So,
But yeah, that was big in the 80s. Kiss tend to be up there with their material. They had 3 good videos that came out. But I do like the fact of Bruce Kulick. This album proves he belongs in Kiss. Probably should have been there in '82. Uh, I don't like what happened with the album sales. Here's an album that, to my math, should have been platinum, but to officially was gold. Okay. Again, you have to go based upon, even in '85, not everywhere had the scan. So I think it sold platinum. I mean, ask yourself this: if the album before it sold platinum, the album technically before it might have been double platinum, and the album after it was platinum but close to double platinum, this should have been at least platinum officially.
yeah.
But for some reason, it's still listed as gold. But we'll leave it as what they say. It's a gold record. So that tour was a hit, and I don't think this took anything away from Kiss. It just built up upon that they are back, and another album they build upon to improve from the Elder Mess.
Yes. So my ranking for Asylum is another 10 out of 10. And for my favorite track, I'm going King of the Mountain. But this whole album is just perfect.
So after the Asylum tour, which ended in '86, Kiss does not do an album for 1986. And the reason being, they're trying to grab a producer, which the previous 2 albums had Paul Stanley technically as the producer. And the producer that they wanted to get was Ron Nelson. Yeah, there he is. The guy who needs to get a different color t-shirt. People, look, my man DJ Ronnie G loves t-shirts, but we got to get them off just white. Okay, maybe a gray, maybe a blue. Hey, he can go with pink. Hot pink would be perfect. Just get him a little color. It's okay to have a little color. DJ.
Just remember, DJ, if all else fails, black.
Yeah. But yeah, so '86, a lot of Kiss fans will call that the time to rest. And if you got some stuff you want to go buy and collect, you got a break, so go buy and collect. So yeah, we didn't have anything beside at the end of the Asylum tour because Ron Nelson went to produce. He had just got done producing Heart, and that album Heart was a major hit. And he went to Ozzy Osbourne. What was the album? I always forget this album.
Bark at the Moon?
No, it wasn't Bark at the Moon. Well,
while you're thinking about that, I want to address Mr. BSRG here. He says, love 80s Kiss. Paul's voice was at its best. Great show, guys. Sub.
Yes,
Thank you, man.
Yes, it was. But they had to wait for the producer. So that's the reason why it got pushed to '87. So '86 is the first year where there was no Kiss album, no touring, besides the end of the Asylum tour. It was nothing there. So, like I said, it was the first time you can say an official break for Kiss.
And Peter and Ace had to be looking at that and be like, why couldn't we have that?
Yeah, they again, some of them reasons I can understand their gripes. I can understand Paul gripes and Gene gripes, but they could have took a break. Well, they did technically count 78. They did take a break,
Yeah.
Minus they did the solo albums, but but they do come back with what I call the traditional 1987 Crazy Nights. And if you find it keyboard heavy, Kiss meets keyboards more than Unmasked, it's because they were. And they were at this time they were trying to compete with Heart. Even Ozzy with the album, I can't think of his '86 album. Uh, it'll hit me later on. It's keyboard heavy. Yeah, we got to get you some. We're going to help you out, man. We're going to do a stream where we're going to get you some colored shirts. But
Yes.
yes, the White Snake, which was a version of Deep Purple, which always had a keyboardist, but keyboards in '87 and '86 and '87 were big. Even Van Halen. Uh, when you think of Van Halen, 5150 album with Sammy Hagar, that is keyboard heavy. So Kiss bites into the keyboards. Uh, the keyboardist doesn't get much credit. I can't say his last name, but his first one is Phil.
Let me look. Let me look it up.
Go ahead, you can look it up. He's a great keyboardist. He did the entire Crazy Night album, which I think did a wonderful job. There's nothing wrong with Crazy Nights. I love that album. But there are some diehard Kiss fans that shy away from the keyboards. Okay, you know.
Phil Ashley is who it said.
And he's a pretty darn good keyboardist. Are there videos for Crazy Nights? Were title Crazy Nights, Reason to Live, which was huge on MTV, and Turn on the Night.
Yeah,
good. They're good songs. My favorite is Deep in the Night, which is a '82 demo that got remade for this album. I like Crazy Nights. I like the tour. I was there for the tour. I love the tour. There's a song that Paul Stanley never did live. It's called My Way. And if you ever hear the studio track, my man's voice is like, no wonder. His voice would have been shot if he tried to sing that on tour. His voice is wow. That's all I can say. Anybody I heard from a lead singer and their voice being like that and hitting notes that high, there's very few. Robert Plant, David Coverdale. They're just the ones off the top of my head I can think of. Roger Daltrey, but Paul Stanley's up there, man, with that album, that song, My Way. And no, it's not a remake of a Frank Sinatra tune. But that song is awesome. And always flabbergasted me, I always said to myself, why wasn't that a track that was put out there for a single? But then when you think about it later on, how high and how to do that, you couldn't do that every night on tour. No way. Impossible.
Yeah.
So I think that was just a song he had that he wanted to prove his voice range, but it wasn't
a song. And he did.
Yeah, and it was a song that okay, this is proving I can sing that high, but I'm not going to be doing this on tour. No.
Right.
So,
but that song, My Way, is probably my pick for best song of the track. And with this album, as someone that, again, has pretty much consumed all of Kiss's discography up to Kiss Unplugged in about a month and a half, something very interesting starts happening with the albums going forward, where I start really yearning for that classic 70s Kiss sound, and I start kind of getting tired of the 80s Kiss sound. And don't get me wrong, it sounds great, but I'm like, okay, this is good, but when can we get back to the 70s sound? And so when I first listened to this, my initial gut instinct was to give this a 6 or a 7 out of 10. Now, though, taking it into it, judging it on its own, I still give it like an 8.5 out of 10. It is a great album, sounds great, but it does sound a bit of a step down from Asylum.
I will put it up above Asylum. As a Kiss fan, I will give it a 9. I could have been higher had they kept the track Sword and Stone on the album. That is a track that should never have been cut from the album. Uh, Sword and Stone ends up being covered by another band. There is a demo on YouTube. You can hear Kiss's version that was supposed to be on the album. Again, that's the producer's decision on what gets cut and what don't. I think it was a mistake. Sword and Stone should have been on this album. I think it would have been an excellent
Yes.
choice. I think it would have been a great song to go after Reason to Live. Instead of doing Turn on the Night as the third video, I would have preferred Sword and Stone.
Right.
So, yes, that's a demo, people, and that's the second time I would mention demos. After this, I pretty much don't have demos to mention.
Right.
But
And then after this, we get another compilation that has some original songs called.
before we go there,
Oh,
subject matter for that we will be discussing on another stream. Eric Carr, problems start happening with Kiss during this tour. We can't talk about it now because we got a total Eric Carr stream coming Wednesday, and we're going to talk about it. But just a little asterisk there. This is probably the time there's problems with Eric Carr. Well, let's not say it's Eric Carr. I don't perceive Eric Carr as a problem, but certain band member of Kiss problem with Eric Carr.
yep.
So we'll discuss it, but this is we'll just take a note that when we talk Wednesday, this is the start of where Eric Carr starts having problems in Kiss.
Yeah.
So
So now we can get
just
into smashes, thrashes, and hits.
Yep.
And this has two new songs and one remake, correct?
Yeah, well, you have to be careful how you define it because we do have two new tracks, pretty good tracks. They did well on MTV for videos. I would say the quality of the two songs isn't that great, but for a greatest hits album, it is what it is. But the track in question is Eric Carr singing Beth, which Eric Carr totally was against. He did not want to do it.
Which is a shame because honestly, I prefer his version over Peter Criss's, at least as far as studio recordings go.
Yeah, but here the man's been in Kiss. This is 1988. He's been in Kiss 8 years, and he has never done a lead on a studio album, giving him to do Peter Criss's song as a lead. I do like Eric Carr's version of Beth. I do like it. I'm glad he finally got something on there that has his voice. But I really feel bad that it had to be Beth. Okay. Let's just say out of all the songs, he could have sung Black Diamond. I don't think it would have been that much of a problem because that's one of the songs he has done live, Black Diamond.
Mm-hmm. And does it very well, by the way.
Yeah.
Which, side note, did you actually watch that clip I sent you earlier?
Yes, I did. I've seen it. I've seen many of it from the 1980 tour, both in Down Under, New Zealand, and in Europe. But as far as this album goes, for the 80s, this was a must-have if you were a Kiss fan. But if you weren't a Kiss fan, you would want this album because if you just want the hit songs, then this is the album. If you wanted just like I said, if you want to buy Asylum, but you only wanted to hear the song Tears Are Falling, it makes more sense to buy Smashes, Trashes, and Hits than it is to buy the whole album of Asylum. You wanted to
Right.
hear Heaven's on Fire, but you don't want to buy the entire album, the greatest hits version. And I think this is the reason why officially this is the only official album that has sold 2 million copies. That did go double platinum, which says a lot. It says a lot. A lot of Kiss fans were upset at this time. They didn't want another greatest hits album because you had double platinum and Killers. Okay,
Yeah.
a lot of Kiss fans were wanting a Alive 3 and felt that that would have been a perfect time for an Alive 3 album. But Kiss went this route. Uh, they took off for 1988, but Paul Stanley does a solo tour. And when I mean solo tour, he was playing small clubs. And when I mean small clubs, I can tell you when he was here in Delaware, it was pretty much a bar. Couldn't
Right.
hold more than 200 people. And, I can understand why he did it. Uh, Even at that time, everybody knew he was carrying the ship because Gene Simmons was off there doing God knows what. And so I can understand Paul wanting to stretch his legs.
Time out for a second. What do you mean by Gene was doing God knows
Oh,
what?
let's see. He was too busy producing other people's albums to focus on Kiss. He was too busy trying to be a Hollywood actor than to focus on Kiss. Look,
Wait, hold on.
Runaway.
He tried acting
Yes.
outside of Kiss Meets in the Phantom of the Park?
Yes, he did Runaway with Tom Selleck.
Wow.
Yeah. Some of the other ones aren't too great. The Runaway one isn't too bad. But yeah, Paul
Watch
Stanley
Party?
was carrying the Kiss flag. Yeah. So uh so Smashes Trashes was just, let's put out a greatest hits album, which did what it was intended and actually did more than what it was intended because it went double platinum. Uh and it probably kept Kiss going with that break. So we'll talk about that break on the Eric Singer thing because Eric Carr video when we do it Wednesday.
Yeah.
There's more to be talked about that. So after this little mini tour and everything, Kiss goes into the studio and they do Hot in the Shade. That's Revenge. It's not Hot.
Oh, hold on a second. I forgot to load that picture and let me fix that.
Yeah.
Okay. And let's get this out of the way right off the bat. This is the last, sadly, full studio album Eric Carr plays on.
Correct. This is the first album Kiss has where it has 15 studio songs. So, in a way, it's a double album. Okay. A lot of people complain about this album, and what they take away from it is they feel it was polished up demos. On some of them, I could see their point, but hey, if you're paying $15 at the time for a CD and you're getting 15 songs, that's more than what some other people put. Look, some albums you only get 9, maybe 10 at the time. Here, Kiss is giving you 15. Yeah, it was worth it. I was happy with it. I was like 15 songs. Oh, yeah, let's listen to it. Uh, Album cover, I like the idea of the Ankh. I mean, not the Ankh,
The
Sphinx. If you notice, there's a little Egyptian theme there with Kiss there. But they had the Sphinx. They had the Sphinx on the tour. It would open its mouth and laser beams would come out. Uh, that was I would say that was one of the biggest. When I mean tours, big tours, production tours since the original band, because like I said, they had the Spinks. They had fireworks to everything. Old Kiss live start coming in this version of this tour. There's on YouTube. You can look up 100 of the tours from Hot in the Shade, and you'll see what I mean.
So, quick question regarding how big this was. You're mentioning that old Kiss traditions start coming back. So, from Lick It Up to now, all the things that they would do for theatrics, like, for example, Gene Simmons blowing fire or
Well,
Gene spitting up blood.
he always spit. He was still doing the breathing of fire, but as far as spitting blood, that stopped when he took the makeup off. Fireworks got cut down. Okay, you didn't get the smokes and grenades.
And of
They
course, Ace Frehley is the only one that would make his guitar smoke.
Yeah, but as far as like the smoke and the bombs, by 87 into 88, and now you're in the Hot and Shade tour, 89. Kiss is bringing that back. And when I mean big stage setups, this was a big stage setup. This stage setup was huge. Like I said, you haven't seen anything that huge since I would say the Love Gun. The Love Gun
So,
tour.
so
So
my second question regarding that is, which stage show would you say was bigger? The one that you're describing here for Kiss in Hot and Shade, or Iron Maiden's Power Slave tour?
no, Iron Maiden couldn't compare to Kiss on their stage tours. Maybe with mid '80s Kiss, maybe because the stage got reduced, the bombings got reduced. But if you're talking like right now, 1989, no, 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 they couldn't compete. Couldn't compete. Couldn't compete. Like I said, if you go watch that '89 tour from anywhere, there's I know they definitely have one from Detroit from 1989 90 of the Hot and Shade tour, and you watch that whole concert, you'll see what I mean when I say about they bringing back the fireworks and the bombs. Now, '89 on its tour again, we'll mention about this. Eric Carr starts having problems again. Not his fault, but there's issues there.
Yeah.
Also, the rumors start. Here's Eric. There's a video called Rise to It. And Gene and Paul put the makeup back on for that video. Eric does not put his makeup back on, and Bruce does not have any makeup to put on. So they just sit there when you see the video, but you see Gene and Paul in makeup. That angered a lot of Kiss fans
I'm
because
looking this up, by the way.
Eric Carr should have been in makeup. All right. Also, at this time, and you have to remember from 83 all the way to now, Paul and Gene, yes, they would bring Bruce and Eric to talk on interviews, but they didn't do it like they did with the original band, all four there. Okay.
Right.
Now, there is occasionally where there's two members, like Paul and Ace or Gene and Ace. That did happen. But 9 times out of 10, Eric and Bruce were pushed to the side. Well, it tends to change now after this tour where Gene and Paul starts including, but unfortunately at this time, Eric Carr is passed away. But you can play that. You can show the video. There they are back in makeup, Gene and Paul. Eric is not in makeup. Now, there was rumors at the time that as soon as they put this makeup on, the reason they did this was because a lot of people were talking about the original band maybe getting back together. All right? This is where the rumors first started.
And real quick, before you even go further with that, Ace around this time, Fraley's Comet had come and gone, right?
he started way earlier. You have to remember when he left Kiss, he had a 3-record deal with Kiss where he does not put any solo material. So, but he got paid 25% of the album of Creatures of the Night, Lick It Up, Animalize, and Asylum.
Okay.
So, as his parting from the band, he got paid all the way to there. Peter Criss at the time still was 25%. But here's what happened. In 89, he goes for bankruptcy. Gene and Paul try to help him out. And they restructure his finances and also buy out his makeup. So right here, right now, it's not during the reunion tour. Right now in 89, Gene and Paul buy the Catman's makeup. All right. So they own his makeup starting right now. All right. Ace still owns his makeup at this point. Okay. That means Kiss cannot use his makeup without paying or without Ace really giving permission. Peter Criss at this point in 1989, because of financial struggles, let's be honest, he wasn't doing anything. And Kiss trying to help him out, but also sweeten the deal. Hey, you have that makeup, we'll give you $250K. I don't know what the figure was, but whatever it was, Peter Criss took it and he sold his rights to his makeup. But there was big talk about maybe a Kiss reunion with the original band. Then there was talk, we're not going to bring Peter back. So what we'll do was we will do a Gene, Paul, and Ace, and we'll put Eric back in his his Fox makeup.
Which would have been cool to see.
Would have been cool. But then again, there was another talk. Well, let's not even venture there, and let's put Bruce Kulick in makeup. Let's do a tour with this version of Kiss in their makeup, but style it like they did in the 70s, which I think would have been perfect. Kiss put on their makeup. No, it might not have been Ace and Peter, but I would have had no problem with Eric Carr putting on his makeup and say Bruce Kulick putting on Paul Stanley's Bandit makeup. Good
Or
to go.
something else original.
You know, it wouldn't have cost them a dime. Would have probably actually sold a lot of stuff. Now, I wouldn't say it was a permanent thing. I would have said it would have been a one album, one tour, done.
Mm-hmm.
But I would have seen Eric putting on the makeup with Ace Frehley and not Peter Criss coming back. Not because Peter Criss didn't want him back. Let's just say Gene and Paul didn't want Peter back. So
Yet.
Yeah. So yeah, I would say out all the tours that I've seen with the 80s Kiss, I would say Hot in the Shade was probably the best tour I saw and show.
Okay.
Just in my opinion. And as far as Hot in the Shade as an album, I like it. I can understand why people say it's not a great album, but
I am one of those, by the way.
I do like it. I figure it's definitely not The Elder. It's definitely not Unmasked or any of these bad albums. It's just an album,
Mm-hmm.
I accept it and I take it. I listen it to maybe once a year and that's it. If you do, but
Right.
I wouldn't say it's the worst thing they did. So
For me, this is where I really start to get bored of the 80s Kiss sound and start yearning for that 70s sound to come back. And I think around this time, if I was alive back then and had heard those rumors that Kiss were thinking about either A, reuniting with the original band or just bringing back Ace and having Eric Carr go Fox mode again, I would have eaten those rumors up like I did at one point about a certain, we'll say, company that Disney currently owns.
Mm-hmm.
But as it stands, Hot in the Shade is where I really started getting tired of the 80s Kiss sound, or just the sound that wasn't the 70s, and even rethinking it, judging it under its own rights. It's just not, the album's just kind of there for me. So I give it a 6 out of 10. And I honestly cannot pick a best or worst track.
Well, for me, I would give it a 7.5. I would say my favorite song off of that album gotta be Forever. I'm sorry. That's probably one of their best
Actually,
songs.
yeah, that is a good one. I'll take that back.
There is a rumor, some people can say it is true, some say it's not, that that is Eric Singer playing the drums on Forever. I am not sure about that. I would say that's Eric Carr, but I will stick to that. But I have never seen or heard proof that it was Eric Singer. Though you have to remember, Gene and Paul tend to do demos with different people.
Mm-hmm.
So if Eric Carr is doing demos with Gene and Bruce, more likely Paul will be doing a demo with Eric Singer and whoever, you know. So is it possible? It is possible, but I will still lean that it is Eric Carr playing drums on Forever. So
Right.
and then
And
sadly
so,
after this tour is when Eric Carr sadly gets cancer and passed away. We will talk about that on Wednesday's stream.
mhm,
Kiss goes and decides to bring first Eric Singer as a temporary replacement. They didn't want Eric Carr to play drums on the Revenge album when it was being recorded because they didn't want him to get, according to their words, overworked. So on the Revenge album, the only thing Eric Carr officially does is he has the Eric Carr Jam, which is a pre-recording of him back in '81 with Ace Frehley. They dub
which
over Ace
which
Frehley with Bruce Kulick.
which I looked that up, and it's because they didn't want to pay Ace at the time.
Pretty much, yep. And then he sings on "God Gave Rock and Roll to You." His part is he is the what is it? The one song that needs to be sung. I think that's the part. So that's him singing there with Gene and Paul. So that's the only thing he officially does in Kiss before he passes. The rest of the album, besides one track, is Eric Singer, and the other one is I think his name Keith Valentine plays another one track of another song on Revenge. So
Right.
now
So,
Revenge is probably
oh, I
the
forgot to bring it
album
up.
Eric Carr would probably wished he was a part of to do. Had this been in '89, that would have been even a bigger hit than what it turned out to be. Uh, Revenge is a great album. Love it from start to finish. Probably the best, second best album after Creatures of the Night. There's some people would say better than Creatures of the Night. Uh, I put it very close to Creatures. Uh, but then again, unfortunately, this album also only goes gold. And though 4 videos off for this album, they had 4, did quite
Mm-hmm.
well on MTV. The album sold quite decently. But the reason I think it didn't go platinum was because by this time in 1990, grunge has really destroyed heavy metal rock and roll. It
Mm-hmm.
destroyed it.
Yeah.
So, yes, this was the great turnaround for Kiss, but unfortunately, it was at the wrong time because grunge destroyed it. So, really, you only had diehard Kiss fans buying this album. Though later on, other people, semi. Let me clarify: diehard Kiss fans and Kiss fans. All right, diehard Kiss fans are somebody that's gotta have every single Kiss record, memorabilia, everything. If it says Kiss, they gotta have it. And Kiss got that group of 500,000 people that are normally going to buy that stuff, regardless. Then
Mhm.
you have the other group of Kiss fans. They might have 10 records that they own of Kiss. So you
Yeah.
would call them a Kiss fan still, but you won't call them a diehard. Okay. Now compare that to other bands. Like I said, I'll throw out Aerosmith. Aerosmith probably, like I said, sell more albums. But can you tell me there might be a handful of diehard Aerosmith people that own every single Aerosmith album? But I don't think there are that many compared to Kiss fans that will do that.
Not that I know of.
No.
Like the most I can talk about with for me with that is see Crit says 1 hour 30 minutes left. I know. We're almost done. But for me, the closest thing that I can equate to that is a Christian rock band you've heard me talk about multiple times called Petra. I would classify both myself and my friend Ian, the headless guitarist, we are diehard fans of that band by that metric because I do have on my phone every single album they have made. And so yeah, that's the closest thing I can equate to that, but it's even I recognize that is nothing compared to Kiss, which even back in the 70s, you know better than me, Phil, they had lunchboxes, they had posters, they had shirts, they had
Yeah.
it was
I mean,
literally like
memorabilia wise,
Spaceballs.
memorabilia, yeah, they
Spaceballs the
made money.
breakfast cereal.
But
Spaceballs the
but
flamethrower.
here's the thing. I'm talking just buying the music. Like I said, Kiss fans, if there's a record, they gotta have it. There are more Kiss fans, diehard Kiss fans, that I can run up to tomorrow and talk to that say, yes, I have every studio album they ever released. Every or even that, when I say studio, I'm even going to throw in the live albums, the greatest hits. They own every Kiss album. Period. It doesn't matter if it was good, bad, or otherwise. And they have more of them type bands than they do the basic fan. Look, I know people today. I love Judas Priest, and they'll have two of their albums, but that's it. Or I have Whitesnake. Well, I have Whitesnake, the '87 album, but they don't own anything else of Whitesnake. Would you
or
call
or
that a fan?
or
No.
the subject of our last one, you have people that will only own and listen to either Ozzy Sabbath, people that will only listen to Dio Sabbath, and even though they are in a vast minority, people that would only listen to Tony Martin's Sabbath.
No. But like I said, when it comes to Kiss, they have the most diehard. Look, in the '80s, it was said you go to a concert, you're going to a Kiss concert, or you're going to a Grateful Dead concert. And people couldn't understand back in the '80s, even the '70s, why people were going to Grateful Dead concerts where their albums never sold, but their concerts were always jam packed.
I
Well,
have a feeling it had to do with a lot of green.
well, I'm not going to go there one way or the other, but that's the reason behind it. For a Kiss concert, yeah, there was stuff going on at a Kiss concert, but Kiss concerts was what you would consider your introduction to a concert. More people went to a concert the first time to a Kiss concert than they did any other band. Oh, who was your first concert? Oh, it was Kiss. Kiss is mandatory. And if you look at today, even today, if you're going on a tour and you want to go see a live tour, not me because I'm not really happy with the band right now, But if I will have to say, I got to make sure my kids see Kiss live at least once. I got to see my grandkids see Kiss live at least once. You're not
Hmm.
saying I need to go see Ozzy Osbourne mumble the words. Uh, Motley Crue can't even what's his name can't even sing the song anymore, and he's making up words as he's going.
Yeah,
It's
Vince
insane.
Neil.
Vince Neil shouldn't be on stage. Uh, but you know, like I said, with Kiss in the '80s into the '90s, yeah, they're guaranteed to get a gold record. Other people
Yeah,
were not, and like I said, grunge destroyed MTV. Grunge destroyed rock and roll music for a while, and it took a good 8 years from '90 to '98 where I could say grunge died, and it did die. Grunge came and it went. But the
yeah,
damage was already done. The music industry has totally changed because of it. Look, people aren't making money by making albums anymore. These bands today are more making money by going on tour. They don't even need an album. Before grunge, you needed an album to do the tour. Now is we don't even you don't even need an album. That's the change in everything, you know. So yeah, Kiss got caught up into that. Like I said, if this album would have been released 2 or 3 years earlier, I think this would have been a bigger album than what it was. But because of grunge, like everything at the time, everybody suffered because of it. But then again, here's another thing. It wasn't just Kiss, like you said, start feeling like flat soda. All these bands in the 80s, by the time they got into the early 90s, were falling flat. They weren't making good material. And not only that, I will say this in the early 80s and late 90s, bands would come together, make an couple albums, and then the next thing you know, the lead singer's off somewhere. The rest of the band's left behind. And I can't tell you how many bands, Van Halen, David Lee Roth went somewhere. If they got lucky, they got Sammy Hagar, right?
yeah,
Let's see. At some point, Judas Priest loses Rob Halford.
yeah.
You know,
And then along comes Tim Owens.
I mean, all these bands, Dokken, they decide to break up. You have Don
Yeah.
Dokken, and then you have George Lynch's Lynch Mob.
Maiden loses Bruce Dickinson and gets
Mhm.
Blaze Bailey for a bit.
So it's like I said, these bands, you know, they did it to the industry themselves. You know, instead of saying let's stick around for 10 years, let's stick around for 5 years. Some of these bands couldn't even do that. Look at Guns N' Roses. They started out in '86 to get an album contract '87. Before '87's over, they already lost their original drummer. By the time they get to '90, they're already down to three original members, and by the end of '93, there's only Axl Rose, and that's it. Kaput. They burned out. Is Guns N' Roses still were they still around? Yes, but they weren't doing anything. So you know, '90s for me was not a good decade for music for me. That was not a good decade. Uh,
Yeah, I can definitely
so
see why.
and like I said, some people there was some good music there. Don't get me wrong, but it was an overall good decade. You know, for
Right.
me, grunge was what disco was in the late '70s. So
So, my thoughts on Revenge. I distinctly remember listening to this album in my car going down the road. I think I was going to look at my local retro game store. I turn on Revenge. I listen to the very first track, which I believe the very first track of this was the song Unholy. No, has nothing to do with the Sam Smith song of today, by the way. Thank goodness. But listening to that song and the songs after. This was the second time that the act of listening to a song to an album, it was just outright annoying me, because again, it seemed like this was not even a departure from what Kiss were doing in the 70s. This was Kiss departing from what they were doing in the 80s, trying to keep up with what was going on in the 90s at the time, and it just does not gel well to me. Now, that being said, Forever is a great song.
That's from Hot and Shade, not
Oh,
Revenge.
whoops, sorry. Every time I look at you was from Revenge. That's a good song. And Car Jam is a great tribute. And even if I do personally prefer the Petra version, which look it up if you haven't heard it, God Gave Rock and Roll to You is a great song. Even if the movie version that was in Bill and Ted is better because it has Steve Vai in it.
No, he only does that intro part. The rest is
I know,
not
but him doing that intro part just makes the song. That's the first version of the song that I heard. I can't unhear it.
That's fine.
So yeah. But yeah, overall, this album 4 out of 10 for me. It is objectively a good, well-made album, but I was long tired of Kiss running from their 70s sound, and even now their 80s sound.
Well, for me, I would say it is a 9 out of 10. And the reason that it's 9 out of 10 is this album should have been made in 88, not 90. Had it been made in 88, I think this would have been maybe a 2 million, 3 million seller. Probably would have been a major hit. But because it was made at the time it was made and the year it was made, it didn't reflect that in sales. Now, popularity, that's a different story. Sometimes popularity does not equal the same as sales. This album was very popular. It was big on MTV. Kiss fans loved this album. I loved this album. I would have been more impressed if there had been Eric Carr playing on there, but Eric Singer does the job. So for me, it was a Creatures of the Night album that it's not Creatures of the Night, but it's the same type. It's a turnaround for me. And we got heavy metal, no keyboards. We got away from the keyboards. We went back to meat and potatoes, Kiss. And for me, I love it. So I will give it, like I said, an 8, 9 out of 10, no problem.
Mm-hmm.
So the next album we got up is
Alive 3. Now, and we're only really talking about one specific
We're only going to
song
talk about one. Now, Kiss hasn't done a live album since Alive 2, and that's 1977. Here it is, 1993. And they felt it was time. Again, this album probably would have been a lot better coming behind Revenge if it was 1988 instead of 1993. But it does well. It does go gold. The album is considered a success. I like Alive 3, but I do love the Star Spangled Banner as a special treat on this. And that was Kiss's way for the war in the Persian Gulf at the time, Gulf War. So I loved it. Loved everything about it. Is it Alive 1? No. Is it Alive 2? No. But as a live album and Alive 3, I thought it was good. But here's the thing. If you're a person in 1993 and you have the opportunity to buy Hot and Shade, Revenge. I don't think they have any songs on there from Crazy Nights. But them two albums, why buy that when you can buy a Live 3 and you get even more songs that they haven't done in a while? And I would have bought a Live 3. To me, it's like a greatest hits album. You know, so I don't see uh, Kiss fans outside the diehards really buying this album. Where I definitely, and you do see diehards buying this album because it does go gold. So,
Right.
and you see my point now. There's 3 straight albums of gold, not platinum, gold. The people, this is before the internet, so you can't blame pirating or anything like that. But what you're starting to see is people aren't buying albums anymore like they used to. Like somebody like Bon Jovi, well, I put an album out, I'm going to sell 1,000,000 copies. That doesn't happen today because as soon as they come out with the album, it's somewhere getting ripped. And once let's just say I buy an album and I know Paul, I say, here, Paul, here you go, where you can rip it for yourself. His friend's going to rip it. So, yeah, album sales are not like it used to be. Very hard today in today's world to even get a gold record to go gold.
Now, again, kind of off topic, and I know I'm talking about a different band here, but is this why in the 90s Lars Ulrich of Metallica had that beef that he did with Napster?
Yeah, because again, you have to remember, this even happened even before the 90s. Even in the 80s, that you would get a record and you have like on the record sleeve, don't copy a cassette. And what was happening was people would have got a record, they would copy it to a blank cassette, or when they did come out with the recording cassette where you can get two, one to play and one to record, you're hurting them because in their minds, that's an album that you should have bought. I see it more like a painting. If Van Gogh paints you a painting and you pay for it, if you want to resell that painting, so be it. You already paid for it. So you can't really complain because the original person bought it. And if he says to somebody, oh, make a copy, who are you to complain about it? You already got paid for it. Now, their complaint was, well, we should get paid something where, okay, it's hard. It's hard. Did it kill the record industry? Yes. But did the record industry do it to themselves? Think of it this way. Throughout the 80s and early 90s, they're paying $18. Sometimes you could got it on sale when it first came out, $15 for a CD. Come to find out, a CD wasn't that expensive to record and make a copy of, right?
Right.
Okay, you're talking maybe $1 to make the damn thing, $1 maybe to put the recording on, so $2.
Hold
so
up
the
one
record
second,
industry
Phil.
was making $16 off of
Hold
a
on one.
CD.
Hold on 1 second, Phil. I gotta ding you for it since we are on our channel. On my channel, that is.
Language! And for gosh sake, watch your language.
Well, it's my channel. It's got to be slid. Okay, it
All right,
isn't like
fine.
it was a major thing. But be that as it may, $16 profit every time you're buying a CD. They kind of did it to themselves. Cassettes, they were charging $12. No. I can understand why people were saying, okay, I got a blank here, blank cassette, make me a copy. Unless you were a record collector or, like I said, a diehard Kiss fan, did you really care as long as you got the music? So, but anyway, Alive 3, I give it an 8 out of 10. It was good. Not the greatest of the live ones, but it was good.
Okay. I only listened to the Star Spangled Banner, which was a good version, so I'm not going to give the album a ranking. But again, it was enjoyable. Now, the next album, I have to confess, I have a big problem with this album, and that's this one. Now,
Right.
I d- I didn't know what this was going to be
Okay.
when I walked in. I thought this was going to be another either Kiss album or Kiss compilation. What I got when I first turned it on was a compilation of other artists playing Kiss songs.
Okay.
And
First, do me a favor. Put that cover back up. Now, before we go on, let me point out two things. First, the album that you see up there that's actually from the video, but the record cover is a similar one. Now you had at the top either the edited, that was the Walmart version, and everywhere else that had the unedited where it showed the SS in that word. Okay. The second thing is to point out was you see the American flag. Well, there's other versions of this album cover where it has the flag of Canada, the flag of Great Britain, Japan, Australia. So depending on where you were, that country's flag would be there. The other thing to note is the makeup. You see Paul Stanley's makeup, you see Gene Simmons, and you see Peter Criss. Whose makeup do you not see there?
Aces.
Ace Frehley. Again, it goes to like I was saying back a couple of albums ago. Kiss bought the rights in '89 from Peter Criss to access his makeup. So they could put Peter Criss's makeup on that album. Now, Ace Frehley at this time owns his makeup. So if Ace Frehley says, can't do it, they can't do it. Guess what? Ace Frehley says, can't do it. So what they do is, if you look really hard, it's a brownish makeup, but it's kind of Paul Stanley's bandit makeup.
I do see it, yes.
Yeah. So there is the thing there. And for people today, just real quick, talking about the makeup, Kiss owns Peter Criss's makeup. Ace Frehley, when he comes back to Kiss in '96, signs a release that they can use his makeup, but Ace Frehley gets paid. Now, Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley can say whatever they want, that they own his makeup outright. Yes, they can use his makeup, but Ace Frehley gets paid. He has no control over it if they use it. If you see it, there's a video on YouTube about 2004, Dunkin' Donuts, you see Ace Frehley in makeup for that commercial. This is after he left Kiss the second time. They can't stop him from putting on the makeup. Think of it like Dr. Pepper and Coca-Cola. Most places in the United States, Coca-Cola produces Dr. Pepper. But Coca-Cola does not own Dr. Pepper. Dr. Pepper is owned by the 7-Up Dr. Pepper Company. They're the same people that make RC and Squirt.
Uh-huh.
They license it out to Coca-Cola, which means, according to however they arrange it, either once a month, maybe once a year, the Coca-Cola Company can produce Dr. Pepper and distribute it. But they have to pay the Dr. Pepper 7-Up Company for that. So this is an example. Same thing with Ace's makeup. Ace really can still own his makeup. Paul and Gene can still use his makeup. But as long as he's getting paid, he can't say anything. Okay? Peter Criss sold his makeup outright. He has no rights to the makeup. None. Absolutely none. So, but about this album, this was a very popular album because a lot of famous people did songs for this album. Lenny Kravitz with what's his name? Stevie Wonder. Kiss does a song with Garth Brooks. Uh, there's a bunch of other bands. The funny thing is, inside the album sleeve, there's a bunch of bands that wanted to do some Kiss songs, but were told they weren't allowed. Ozzy Osbourne, well, he wanted to do a Kiss song for the album, couldn't do it. His record company said no. Megadeth wanted to do it. They said no, but they did end up doing it a song for their. They do a Kiss song, but they didn't do it for here. They do Strange Ways. And a bunch. There's like a whole list. You'd be surprised of who was supposed to do Kiss songs for this album, and had they gotten everybody, you would have been like, wow. Again, it's not the person or the band that decides that they can or cannot do. The record company decides if they're allowed to do it or not. So, reason you didn't get Ozzy or you didn't get Megadeth or you didn't get other people, they were told no by the record company. So, but the people they got was quite well. It was very popular. Kiss, I think this went gold as well. So that was another sleeve for them. Uh, and they benefited from this break because instead of going on a tour, what they did was they went on a convention tour. That means they followed a Kiss convention where they sold memorabilia and stuff, and Kiss would do a unplugged version of their tour for that convention. So, and it was because of that convention and that little tour that they got Peter Criss to come on stage, and that started the ball rolling for Unplugged. And now I forget, is Unplugged one of our albums, or did we push that with the part 3?
We have it. It's actually the next one after this.
Okay, so put up the Unplug.
Well, hold on. Before I do, I want to give.
Sorry.
I want to just go into this one for me. So, in talking to you, Phil, kind of made a big deal about how much I didn't like this album. But in all honesty, the album as a whole, what I listened to of it, I'll confess I haven't listened to the whole thing. I probably will. I will at some point. I intend to. But really, my problems with this album come from one song. Aside from the fact, I didn't expect to hear other people sing Kiss songs. My problems with the album itself, taking for what it is, comes from one song, and that is the version of Rock and Roll All Night that Toad the Wet Sprocket do on here. They outright butcher that song. I mean, butcher it.
I actually like the change that they did. I actually
more
like
power
that
to you for
change
that.
and different version of how they structured Rock and Roll All Night.
And more power to you for that.
I'm just saying, I knew a lot of Kiss fans that loved it. I met a few that hated it. But for me, when I talk to other Kiss fans, that's one of 2 or 3 songs on that album that people liked. They loved the Garth Brooks with Kiss.
Yeah, he did good.
Yep.
And Lenny
They loved the
Kravitz
Lenny
and Stevie
Kravitz
Wonder,
with
they did good.
With what's his name? Stevie Wonder. I loved
Anthrax.
I loved this version of Rock and Roll Night, but my favorite off this whole entire album, and originally wasn't going to be on it, but I'm glad they did, was the Japanese artist that did the orchestrated version of Black Diamond. That I think was the best.
That was good.
I have that on my MP3 player. I listen to that all the time.
Yeah, that is a good version. And like I said, Anthrax absolutely knocks She out of the park. That's a home run. But again, I cannot stand. And I think the reason I don't like this version is because I'm looking at it as a fellow musician, because anytime I'm learning a song, 9.9 times out of 10, I am learning it with the intention of it is just me and my guitar, nothing else, that is going to be playing this song. And I go to the greatest lengths that I can within my skill set to try and get the song to sound as close as the original, while of course, still putting a bit of my own flavor to it. And the fact that these guys didn't do that, it
Well,
it it
you
bothers
you
me.
have to look at it this way. If they would have played it the original way as intended, there ain't much of a difference. You're just copying. I like how
I,
they
I'm not I'm not saying that,
yeah,
but
but I'll
it
give them credit. They restructured the song. They made it more acoustical, which is big was big at the time, and it's unique. It's very unique. When I first heard it, I was flabbergasted at how they did it. You know, uh, it wasn't like they just took the song and made it acoustical. They did more.
which
They restructured that whole entire song. You know.
but at the same time, the other thing that bothers me with it is not just that they what bothers me with this song is that in restructuring it, they way mellowed it out, which to me is in direct contrast to what the song's about. I want to rock and roll all night and party every day. That's something you need. That's something that sounds energetic to me, that you get excited over, like how Kiss recorded the song originally.
Hmm. Well, I
So
think that their way of doing it was yes. If you think of it as more a mellowed out version, yeah, I think that was their intent 100%. Uh, is it a party song? Yeah, it's about it being a party song. But I mean, you can't take away from it because even if you change the structure of the song, the words are still the same. The words are still the same. It's just
I
how they toned it down, how they restructured it, how they sing it in a different key. Everything that they're doing is yes, they're changing the song, but it isn't changing the words, you know? To me it's
I
no different than an acoustical version of rock and roll at night if they play it the same way, in the same tone, in the same style as Kiss. You know, I give them a plus because it's unique. You know, if I was a band, if I was told here's the we're doing a compilation album, what song would you want to do? Yeah, I want to do Rock and Roll Night. I don't want to do it the way Kiss did it because they already did it and it's been done that way. I would love to hear a different way of them doing it, but that's just me. You know.
Yeah, and that is one thing that we are gonna just agree to disagree on.
Yeah.
And so overall, since I didn't finish this album, I'm not gonna give it a ranking, but I do intend to give this a second look. And you know what? After hearing what you said, Phil, I'll probably even give that song a second look.
Mhm.
So we'll probably talk about that album again, at least offline. If not, maybe I'll do an updated version of it when we do our part three.
Okay. Well, like
So
I said, man, we're never not going to agree on everything.
I know,
Our
but
music.
but
I
if I'm
mean, there's going to be songs. Like I said, I heard bands remastered, redone, even redo in a totally different way their songs, and you know, sometimes they do it because they just want it to sound different. Sometimes they perform it different. I mean, believe it or not, for the Unplugged album, it didn't make the album itself, but there's an unreleased version of Kiss doing God of Thunder in a country style way of doing it, and like a country song
what album was this for?
for Unplugged.
Oh yeah, that
Yeah, Unplugged.
which
There's a version you can look on YouTube, the
I
unreleased
remember watching
version of
it,
them performing God of Thunder, and it's the country. They call it the country version, and
and
they
it's
singing it like they were in
hilarious,
country music. You know.
and it's hilarious.
And this thing started, the Unplugged started, like I said, because Kiss was doing the convention tour, which was acoustic. MTV was doing the Unplugged thing, and they wanted Kiss, but they wanted it to be different. And they wanted Kiss to perform some songs with Ace and Peter. Now, to get Ace and Peter to agree to it, remember, people have to get paid. And at some points, they looked like this was not going to happen. Okay.
Mhm.
Uh, when it did happen, it was a shock. Unplugged didn't announce that Ace and Peter were there. So here you are, Kiss fans, you're watching the show. And then again, this is before the internet, so you can't have somebody say, hey, original band's going to be performing. All you know is Kiss is going to be on Unplugged Thursday night, for example, 8 o'clock. So you're sitting there, here you are watching Kiss Unplugged. Cool. It's cool. Then lo and behold, you hear, okay, uh, Eric and Bruce are going to step in the back. We're going to bring two other members of the family. And lo and behold, it's Ace and Peter. And people go crazy. They go
Yes.
nuts. You have to remember this is 1995, and it's been 15 years since we had the original band and having them together, all four on stage. So this was huge. I already knew no sooner did I seen them four before any songs were being played. As soon as I saw that four, I knew Bruce Kulick and Eric Singer's time in Kiss was done. Right then and there, it was done.
And it's
Not to
funny you
be
say that because my experience with this Kiss Unplugged is I elected to watch the actual show instead of just listen to the album. And I'm glad I did because seeing them
no.
perform,
The
seeing
first time when I saw this was live. This was before it came out as an album. This was live on MTV. This
right.
would be unplugged.
And that's how I watched it.
Mhm.
And seeing the crowd's reaction when Ace and Peter came out, to it, the roof just about came unglued. Like Paul, especially when Peter Chris was about to sing Beth, Paul had to all but tell the crowd, okay, guys, we need y'all to be quiet now. We need to actually get the show going because they were just too busy chanting for them.
The only
But even
part, and I give Ace really the kudos for, is after the set was done with the original four, and they decided to bring Bruce and Eric back, the crowd started to boo.
yeah,
And Ace really told them, they're part of the family. Don't do that. Which he
yeah,
should not have needed to or had to say, but he did say it. Uh, I'm glad Ace really stood up for him.
yes.
And it was kind of cool seeing all six members of Kiss performing.
Hey, Jonathan.
But I will say again, there was joy, but there was a little sadness, knowing that Eric Singer and Bruce Kulick, you could, like I said, I knew that was it. As soon as I saw them, that was it. It was done. I am glad Eric Carr was not there to have to deal with that. Really would have hated for that. I really personally do not think if Eric Carr, well, I'm gonna save that for the next stream, but
Yeah,
I don't think it. I'm just glad Eric Carr didn't have to deal with that because that's a lot to deal with. And what ends up happening, and this is just to step into a little bit to our next live stream. Kiss gets back together, even though there's a studio album called Carnival Souls that's done right now during this live unplugged. And what ended up happening is the album gets shelved, and they decide to do a reunion tour. They don't get rid of Bruce and Eric, but they pay them for the year. But it was only supposed to be 1 year tour done. Well, that tour made so much money that it made no sense for them to go back to what they were going to.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so at the end of the first reunion tour, the 96 97 tour, they decided to let Eric and Bruce go. So officially they're out. Peter and Ace are in. And when I mean in, yes, they're back in Kiss, but they are hired members. They don't have a say, they don't have a vote. It's totally Gene and Paul running the show. They're just getting paid to be there. So you get the reunion tour, which was very big, huge. And then you get what goes on to the Psycho Circus tour, and then what was supposed to be the farewell tour. So, yeah, we'll get into that in the next part 3 of the Kiss tour
Right.
thing. The next video we're going to have is going to be Wednesday, and that's going to be about Eric Carr.
Hold on 1 second. If you're shutting down, I still got to give my thoughts on Unplugged.
Oh, you can go ahead. I'm not shutting down yet, but I'm just saying we're getting what's coming up. But you can go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Basically, Unplugged, I'll keep it short and sweet. Unplugged is 10 out of 10, both as an album and as an MTV Unplugged special. I'm more partial, as a primarily acoustic player myself, I'm more partial to acoustic playing than full-blown rock. So I think Kiss did a great job translating their either their classic stuff or their new stuff to acoustic. In fact, that's what's helped me learn some of their stuff. Like, if it weren't for the acoustic version of Hard Luck Woman or 2000 Man when Ace does it, or Beth, if it weren't for them doing those songs acoustically like that, I wouldn't have had I probably would have figured out how to learn it, but it would have taken longer and it wouldn't have clicked like it did. And yeah, seeing Ace come back, seeing Peter come back, it was amazing. And there was this one moment that stuck out to me the most with this whole thing. And that's immediately after Peter Criss is done singing Beth, he and Gene Simmons just have a big hug right there in the middle of the stage. And at least in that moment, there was magic in the air.
Yeah. But like we'll see. It's just like anything, it turns sour real quick.
True. But at least for that moment, it was good. And if I had to choose one song, which is nearly impossible, if I had to choose one song as best, I would probably say Beth. And I'll go ahead and say this too. Probably the one negative thing that I can say about specifically the MTV video of this, and this is not MTV's fault. This has nothing even to do with musically. Ace doesn't look very good. He looks like he's the oldest member, even though realistically Peter Criss was the oldest of the founding members.
Are you judging that by Ace's face?
Yes.
Okay. You do remember me telling you all the way back at the first stream at Hotter Than Hell that he was in a car accident. His face was cut up. They only could use he was only in partial makeup because his face got really messed up in that car accident.
I thought it was something darker than that, admittedly.
No.
I thought it was like, because I know we talked about this,
He had a similar accident, similar way that Mark Hamill had right during before Empire Strikes Back. Even Mark Hamill had to wear that partial thing on his face for when he got
See,
so cut up. Yeah.
I had forgotten about that. See, the reason I thought that he had looked bad is because of pretty much nonstop drinking, which he did do.
Yeah. Pretty much, yeah, some people, yes, drinking does affect people's the way they look and the way they act. But as far as his face being like the way it is, yeah, that car accident, yeah. And plastic surgery in the 70s ain't nothing like it is today, you know.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, his face looked. You can look even on the internet. You can even look on YouTube. Mark Hamill, man, and then his car accident, '81. His face really, really, just like Ace, got cut up really bad. He still has the scars on his face. If you look really hard on Mark Hamill, you'll see it there. You'll see it in Empire Strikes Back. You'll see it in Return of the Jedi. Even though they cake that makeup on, yeah, he really got cut up. And that's what happens sometimes in car accidents, especially back in the day when you didn't have to wear a seatbelt and there were no airbags. You were kissing. Back then. It's called kissing the dashboard or kissing the front window. Sometimes your head bobs around. Not only do you kiss the dashboard and the window, but you're hitting the window on the side too. Like I said, these are all prime examples why today you wear a seatbelt.
And I think on that note, I think we can finally start to wrap this up.
Yep. So we'll have the stream for Eric Carr Wednesday, and then we'll do the final part 3 of Kiss. We're going to aim for next weekend. So maybe Sunday or Monday, but more likely be Sunday. Just we'll work it out then.
All right. So go ahead and send me then what it is that I need to listen to and prep for that.
Yep. So thank you everybody for watching. This one was a little long, but yeah, I think it was to the point. So thank you all for watching. Hopefully you'll be there for Wednesday for our Eric Carr stream and for Sunday's part 3 of Kiss. And yeah, thank you. Thank you all very much. And I hate you all.
And for the sake of those that are watching on my channel, I'll go ahead and do my outro and outro video. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure you guys hit like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you are not, for whatever reason, subscribed to Release McCracken, make sure you throw him a subscription also. And just remember, everyone, this is Fandomology, where fandoms collide. See you guys later.